Hi guys, welcome, and who dat? I'm Joe, and I'm here today to present my top 32 in the 2024 NFL Draft that the Saints should focus on, and I believe this list definitely reveals who the Saints will take with their first pick in this year's draft. So I've got a list of 1 through 32. Why 32? Because there's 32 lines on the page. There's also 32 picks in the first round. There's 32 teams. So 32 sounds like a great number to me. If you've watched any of my videos and I mention these prospects, I always tell you I have my top 8. And then after that, it's kind of a crapshoot. So how do I rank these players as far as what I think how the Saints should look at it? This is how I look at it and how it would fit the Saints well. And somewhere in this top 32, you're going to find the player that the Saints are going to pick in the first round. So I thought about going from 32 to 1. But I think I'm going to present this from the top down. And we're just going to break it down with the best players available right out of the gate. And we're going to figure out who the Saints are taking. So I've got these broken up 6 at a time. And excuse me. And I told you guys the top 8 are the ones you have to take no matter what. So first we're going to pull up the first 6. All right. These are the best 6 players in the draft, and this is the order the Saints should consider them. Number 1, Caleb Williams at quarterback. Number 2, Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver out of Ohio State. Number 3 consideration for the Saints should be wide receiver Malik Nabers out of LSU. I think their 4th consideration should be the left tackle Joe Alt out of Notre Dame. Now, Joe Alt's a big guy. I think he's like 6'8", 6'9". I mean, huge, tall guy. And when a player's that tall, I kind of get a little nervous. Not very many of them are that tall, and they don't make it in the league when they are that tall. Joe Alt is a pretty decent athlete, and I think technically he's pretty sound. But for as big as he is, he doesn't have the strength that you would think he would possess. He doesn't show it a lot of the times. And then as good of an athlete as he is, he's still kind of big. And so you get him moving around a lot. And, you know, I'm sure there are issues there too. So still, I think that because tackle's the most important position for the Saints going into the draft, that I would have Joe Alt as the 4th best prospect to take, even though quarterback is the most important position on the field, right? I think that number 5, Drake May, quarterback from North Carolina. Number 6, Jaden Daniels, quarterback from LSU. I think both of those prospects could be as good in the league as I project Joe Alt to be. But this is how I kind of rank them. Like, I think that Williams, Harrison, and Nabers are the best 3 players in the draft. And then I think you go with Alt because of the positional need over the projected ability of May and Daniels in the league. So even though quarterback's the most important position, I think I would take Williams, and then I would have to take a hard look at Alt and those 2 outstanding receivers before I would go quarterback again with May or with Daniels. Now, that's the top 6. That's the way I have them ranked. Either of these 6 players end up at 14, and this, of course, the Saints should take them. And that's my top 6 right there. Now we're going to pull up the next 6. This is 7 through 12. And this is where the cutoff happens. I think Number 7, left tackle Olu Fashanu out of Penn State. Number 8, wide receiver Rome Odunze out of Washington. I think that's your last 2 players that you have to take at 14. So Williams, Harrison, Neighbors, Alt, May, Daniels, and then right here with Fashanu and Odunze. You take those at 14 no matter what. The next 4 on this list are who I think are the next best 4 players. But because of positional need for the Saints at tackle, offensive line in general, that I would consider getting an offensive lineman if your top 8's not there. So I have Brock Bowers at 9, tight end from Georgia. Cooper DeJean, cornerback from Iowa, I have at number 10. And right after him at number 11, cornerback Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo. And number 12, J.J. McCarthy, the quarterback out of Michigan. So I think that those are the 4 prospects that you could take a chance on that will probably develop into really good players in the league, comparable to whatever tackles left on the board. So you take a chance on Bowers or Cooper DeJean or Quinyon Mitchell or even quarterback J.J. McCarthy. I don't think it's a wasted pick. I think you come out with a great player. But those 4 at the bottom here are players that, yeah, they might end up better than the tackles remaining, but we need a tackle pretty bad. So I'm going to put these guys here to round out my top 12. But I think after Rome Odunze, I would immediately start looking at offensive line, and I would have to have serious questions about the 8 offensive linemen that I would consider here in the first round. Outside of Alt, outside of Fashanu, there's 8 that I would consider, 8 more that I would consider in the first round. And I would have to consider them ahead of Bowers and DeJean and Mitchell and McCarthy, even though I think those 4 might end up being better players overall. So that's where you have the big discussion in the draft room. I mean, these guys are literally at the top of my board before the tackles. Except for one. There's 1 tackle. So now I'm going to pull up the 8 and the next 8, and I have all the offensive linemen that I want in the first round right here in this next 8. That's why I say my top 32 is kind of clunky. I'm kind of weighing this out for need. So I showed you the top 12, and I told you I would take 8 before an offensive lineman in this list. But after the top 8, I would take Talise Fuanga out of Oregon State at tackle before I would ever consider Brock Bowers or the cornerbacks or J.J. McCarthy. So Fuanga is the guy on this list that's distanced himself from the rest of this list. And Fuanga is the guy that I think we're going to end up getting at 14 if he doesn't get taken before. I think it's either going to be Olu Fashanu on the left tackle or Talise Fuanga on the right tackle. And then people think Fuanga can play guard too, and so, you know, there's that flexibility there. But Fuanga on this list, head and shoulders above the rest. Now, it gets weird. This list is in numerical order, but not necessarily set in stone in my mind. The next 2 after Fuanga I have to consider are Troy Fautanu out of Washington and Graham Barton out of Duke. Both of them can play tackle. Both of them can play guard. Barton can play center. So I like the flexibility of these 2 ahead of the rest. So you got Fuanga, who I take before them all, except for the top 2 left tackles. Let's not forget about them. And then I really have to consider Troy Fontenot. I have questions about his play strength as a pass blocker, too aggressive as a run blocker. The flexibility is there. I think he's going to turn into a pretty good pro. And I think he's a start right away kind of guy. He might not give you Pro Bowl caliber play, I don't think, right out of the gate, but I think he'll be a pretty solid starter. And I feel the same way about Graham Barton. I don't know if he's going to be a good tackle or not, but I really think Graham Barton is one of those special players that if he can play any spot on the offensive line, he's got the brains. And I like his ability at guard quite a bit. People always say you're not supposed to take a guard high, and I just think it's kind of ridiculous. If you can get a Pro Bowl player at a position and you're set for the next 10 years, how many damn drafts do you need, right? I hate that. You don't take a guard early. Well, I know times have changed, but the Saints drafted Jim Dombrowski with the number 6 overall pick. And Jim Dombrowski ended up one of the greatest guards in Saints history. He played with us for damn near a decade. And don't tell me that wasn't worth a first-round pick. Okay, and I feel the same way about center, guard. The only one I don't really feel that way about is punter, kicker, and fullback. And I don't know. You strike out so many times in the draft. If you do draft a kicker or a tight end or something like that, and they end up being a great player for a decade plus, how can you say it's a wasted pick? Anyway, I lean towards Fataanu and Barton slightly because of their versatility and because I'm pretty sure they're going to turn into pretty good pros. But then you got the next three. J.C. Latham, right tackle out of Alabama. You've got Tyler Guyton, right tackle out of Oklahoma. You've got Amarius Mims, right tackle out of Georgia. These three guys all have the physical ability, the physical tools. They're monsters. And, I guess technically higher ceilings for these three guys than Fataanu or Barton, especially Barton. But you're taking a big risk, I think, with Latham, Guyton, and Mims. Because I think there's just a lot of inconsistency there. I'm not sure if Latham can play on the left side or not. Everyone says J.C. Latham can play guard. And I think he's athletic enough to do what we need him to do. I just worry about his IQ. And, seriously. Don't know if he can switch to the left side or not. But I'll put Latham ahead of Guyton and Mims on this list because of his movement ability. And there is a bit of versatility there, projected versatility. Don't know if he can do the left side of tackle, but at guard, a lot of people expect him to play guard. I like Latham slightly ahead of Guyton and Mims. Now, Mims is a better overall prospect than Guyton, but I have Guyton ahead of Mims because I project Guyton can play the left tackle. He is really athletic. Mims is athletic too. Mims is a little bigger than Guyton. Latham's a monster. All three of these guys, Latham, Guyton, and Mims, are monsters. I think Guyton needs a lot of work. I don't know if Guyton's ready to start right away, but I do project him on the left side, and I think he's athletic enough to do what we need him to do at tackle. So that kind of flexibility, I have him right ahead of Amarius Mims. Amarius Mims is a stud when he's healthy and he's playing great. Mims said he practiced a lot on the left side, so he could probably be versatile enough to move to the left tackle. I just worry about how big he is and the kind of movement we need out of our tackles. I worry that he only started 8 games in college. Amarius Mims had some injury issues. It's another reason he didn't start but 8 games total. So, that's why I have Latham and Guyton slightly ahead of Mims. It's the injury issue and the lack of experience. And when it's all said and done, Amarius Mims will probably be the best player out of the 3 if everything goes perfect. So you just don't know. And that's why I have this group of 8 offensive linemen in the first round jam-packed together, because I would have to do me and the Saints crew and all of the scouts, and we'd have to do a deep dive. We'd have to spend hours, nights, watching film and talking about these guys to have this board settled. And my God, I've been looking at this thing for 2 months now, and I still feel like I'm not sure which direction to go. Fuanga, I think, is going to be a great starter. I think you take him, you don't have to stress. You can take him at 14. Fatanu, I think, is going to be a good player. Taking him at 14, it's a risk, but I think he'll work out. And Graham Barton, no one expects him to go as early as 14, but I think he's going to work out as a player, even though that ceiling might not be there. He's so versatile. And, yeah, we need help on offensive line big time. So I'm not sure if I would take Barton at 14, but right around that area is when you start thinking about trading down, unless you're absolutely in love with one of these other guys that's still on the board. You don't want to trade back too far and miss on any of them. And when it's all said and done, the Saints are going to have their favorite, and they're just going to stick and pick and take their favorite, and they probably should. But to round out this top 8 offensive linemen outside of the top 2 left tackles, I'm going to include left tackle Jordan Morgan out of Arizona. And surprisingly, but I have to, I'm going to include Christian Haynes, the guard out of UConn. Jordan Morgan is not supposed to be able to start right away at tackle. So if Jordan Morgan is your guy, you're hoping for a lot. And, I like what he did at Arizona. I think what he can do what we need him to do in our offense. And is Jordan Morgan going to be a starter right out of the gate? I don't know. If Trevor Penning isn't our starter at left tackle, we're probably going to start the season with Oli Udoh or James Hurst. So, I would rather have Jordan Morgan plug in there over Oli Udoh or James Hurst. Give him a shot. And, depends on the run on tackles, but Jordan Morgan probably won't get taken until the top of the second round. However, I got to put him on this list because we need tackle bad. And if something happens and we trade down, he might be one of the only options left. And I seriously think we consider Morgan ahead of a lot of other better players because of positional need and the versatility. Even if he has to play guard, he can start as a guard right out of the gate. So I don't think Jordan Morgan's out of the question in the first round at all. And then Christian Haynes, this is the deal, guys. He's the best guard in the draft. Not only that, but he's the best outside zone guard in the draft. And in the last several mocks that I've done, and I talked about this before, San Francisco kept grabbing Christian Haynes. In the last couple of days, they've been grabbing Christian Haynes in the first round, at the end of the first round. And it just drives me nuts. It's like, why? Does San Fran have this real need for interior offensive linemen? Because if they do, they're grabbing the right one with this guy if they're going to keep running outside zone. Haynes played his whole career at right guard. My only question with him is, can he bounce to the left side? But he's such a good player, and in the scheme we're going to run, the best guard in the draft, for the scheme that we're going to run, what do you do? I would grab this guy with the 14th overall pick, tell James Hurst to kick rocks, put Sal DeVeri at backup guard and center, and my starting left guard would be Christian Haynes, and I wouldn't worry about it. We'll work out the tackle stuff. I mean, look, seriously, I want a pro. I want a good guy at left tackle, left guard, and right tackle. I'm sick and tired of having, I don't know, we'll see. Ryan Ramczyk's going to retire. We need a right tackle. Trevor Penning, I don't know what we're going to see out of him. Whatever. Hopefully he goes out there and at least uses a 6'7", 330-pound frame to get between somebody and the quarterback, for God's sake, man. And in left guard, I'm tired of this mess. If Sal DeVeri was a good player, he would have started last year ahead of James Hurst. The only thing James Hurst had better than Sal DeVeri is experience. And, how good was James Hurst last year? Not very good. And Sal DeVeri couldn't beat him out. So I'm sick of it. I want to go get a guy that's going to plug in and play and be better than these losers, okay? I'm done with it. I'm sick of it. Don't draft a guard in the first round. Okay, fine. Don't draft a guard in the first round. Oh, you can just go grab any old guard and he'll be fine. That's what they keep saying. Well, Oli Udoh, there you go. All right, how's that for animation and being mundane? Okay, so that's your offensive lineman. This is the main reason I'm doing this video. That's your list right there. Who do you take? Good luck. All right, so after this, and at this point, the Saints have made their pick, in my opinion. Okay, and there's nobody else here that you should even consider because we're at pick. Through all of this, we've mentioned 20 players. The Saints pick at 14. Even if we trade down, I'm hoping one of these guys is our pick. But I'm going to go ahead and round out the 32 now. This next 6 batch, and now these players are the players that are really good and may end up being way better pros than half of those offensive linemen. But because of the need for offensive line, I had to show all those in a group. But this group right here of 6 players, all 6 of these could end up better overall players than half of those offensive linemen I just showed you. Starting with wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU. Some people are kind of down on him. He doesn't show enough and this and that and everything else. And okay, whatever. I'm an LSU fan. I watched Brian Thomas. I got a lot of expectations that he's going to be really good at anything and everything that he's asked to do. And I think he's clearly the number 4 wide receiver in the draft. Some people like Troy Franklin out of Oregon. I've heard that Brian Thomas Jr. and Troy Franklin are kind of the same player, except Brian Thomas is way bigger and, stronger. But Franklin is an overall better wide receiver when it comes to certain technical things. Possibly was asked to run things and learned them in college that Thomas hasn't learned yet. But I'm going to go ahead and stick here with Thomas. And matter of fact, Troy Franklin's not in my top 32. And neither is Dallas Turner. Now, Dallas Turner's a special player. He would be in you guys' top 10, I'm sure. He's not in my top 32. I have him at 33. And it's like I said, I wouldn't get Dallas Turner for the Saints unless he was available in the second round. Yeah. Okay, so right next to Brian Thomas Jr., I have wide receiver Adonai Mitchell out of Texas. I think he's going to be a special player in the league as well. I think Mitchell might end up being overall better than Thomas. If I would have those doubts about Thomas, I wouldn't be putting Troy Franklin ahead of him. I'd be putting A.D. Mitchell ahead of him. Brian Thomas Jr. is probably good enough to take with pick 14. And if that's the case, then A.D. Mitchell is too. But I'm kind of hoping that these 2 guys don't get picked at the end of the first round. I'm hoping that teams are in love with other players like Xavier Worthy or Troy Franklin, and those guys go instead of Thomas and Mitchell, and Thomas and Mitchell can fall into the second round. That'd be fun. Be fun for me because I have them at number 21 and number 22 on my list here. At number 23 and number 24, I've got Jer'Zhan, Johnny Newton, and Byron Murphy. I have those 2 defensive tackles stuck together. Some people say Murphy's better. Some people say Newton's better. I think Newton's slightly better against the run. This past year, Murphy was better against the run than Newton. Murphy played out of position a lot. Murphy's a 3-tech, and he's 6'1". He's only 300 pounds, but Texas had T'Vondre Sweat next to Murphy, and Sweat would be that nose tackle type. But Sweat would have to come off the field, and Texas would put Byron Murphy at that nose spot, which is crazy because he's way too small to do it, but he's so strong, he was able to do it effectively. And that's the kind of talent we're talking about with Murphy, where he can actually play both interior positions. I wouldn't start him at that nose big type, spot. I kind of think Newton might be better there than Murphy, but maybe not. I mean, Murphy, despite his size, shows he's got the strength. And he's such a good pass rusher. Jer'Zhan Newton is a great run stopper, a great pass rusher. And Newton's best spot is the 3-tech, of course, just like Murphy. But Newton showed ability to dropping coverage from off the line too. I mean, Newton's got a lot of, athleticism, movement, slightly bigger than Murphy. So I think both of these defensive tackles are better prospects than Bryan Bresee was coming out of college. Easily, easily. I didn't want us to draft Bryan Bresee at the end of the first round last year. I was hoping that the kid Tampa Bay took would drop to us, Kalijah Kancey. That's the three-tech pass rushing defensive tackle I wanted. I figured once he was off the board, Bresee was just another one of those guys. We could have flirted with a lot of other players at that point. So I wasn't the biggest fan of Bresee coming out. I thought he played with his pad level too high, and ends up Bresee's a pretty good player, and that's great for the Saints. I'm just here to say that I think Johnny Newton and Byron Murphy are going to be better pros than Bryan Bresee. So keep that in mind when those two guys are still hanging around at some point in the first round. They may go very early. And rounding out this six, I have at pick 25, number 25 on my list, Jared Verse, the edge rusher out of Alabama. Florida State. I'm sorry. And Laiatu Latu out of UCLA. So, yeah, these guys are in everybody's top 10, top 15. I've got them here at 25 and 26. I would take all those other players before Jared Verse and Laiatu Latu. Jared Verse is my favorite of the three top edge rushers. He's got the strength to play on the defensive line, and I like that. And I've got Latu here, even though I would probably take Darius Robinson ahead of Laiatu Latu. I think Laiatu Latu is going to be a great player for about 5 years, and then that neck thing is going to come back into play, and his career is going to be cut short. Well, you could have a really good player for 5 or 6 years. This is what I've heard. Latu can give you 5 or 6 good years before that neck thing starts to give him a problem. It's just that scary stuff right there, man. Hey, maybe he ends up having an 8 or 10-year career. I don't know. I think I would just go ahead and take Verse. I've given Latu some respect here. He deserves the recognition of being a great player. It's just too much of a risk for me, and I wouldn't take him at this point. And now I'm going to round out my top 32 by showing you these last 6. And right there at the very bottom is Darius Robinson at 32. I would take him ahead of Latu because Robinson's a bigger player, 285. He can play all along the defensive line, and I think he can give you some pass rush from the edge. And he can stop the run, big enough to stop the run anyway. Let's just go 27 and 28. Terrion Arnold, Kool-Aid McKinstry, both from Alabama. Terrion Arnold is a fine player. He's a solid projection. I think he's going to be a good man coverage cornerback, and that would be really good for the Saints. But he and Kool-Aid are both like 6 foot, 180. I think they need to put on a little bit more weight. But, Terrion Arnold's got skills. Kool-Aid McKinstry had this great year 2 years ago. And this year, nobody wanted to throw at him. I think overall, when I look at the film, I like Arnold way better than McKinstry. And I probably wouldn't take McKinstry ahead of Ladd McConkey or Jackson Powers Johnson. I just think that putting the two kids from Alabama, the same size, played together all this time, I like putting the two kids together. There is a bit of a separation there. I would take Ladd McConkey and JPJ over McKinstry. And then I would have to have that conversation, whether I take McKinstry or Wiggins, if it came down to those two. So let's talk about wide receiver Ladd McConkey out of Georgia. He's a great slot. He's going to be normal, average size guy. He's not going to wow you with his length or overall top speed. He's not going to be the strongest run blocker, but Ladd McConkey's going to be a great slot. The best slot in the class, I think, worthy of mentioning here at the bottom of my top 32. That once A.D. Mitchell and Brian Thomas are off the board, and you have to start considering other wide receivers, I tend to go towards Keon Coleman, Xavier Legette, because they have the size. But you also have these smaller guys, Ladd McConkey, Roman Wilson, and Ricky Pearsall, that are just as talented and just don't have the measurables and the size. Well, I think out of all of those, plus Jalen Polk, who I also love, I think, and Troy Franklin and Xavier Worthy, throw them into there too. Out of all those guys, wide receivers still left, I think Ladd McConkey's the sure thing. And that's the one you take a chance on first. And, if McConkey's gone by our 45th pick in the second round, like I said, the wide receiver goes 4 rounds deep. So I'm going to mention center Jackson Powers Johnson, the law firm from Oregon. And, yeah, he's big, he's strong. I think he could play in any scheme. He's the best center in the class. And this is another one. Christian Haynes is the best guard. Jackson Powers Johnson is the best center. Now, when I say Haynes is the best guard, I'm talking pure guard, because you never know what Fuanga or with Barton or with Fontanu. If those guys end up playing guard, they could be really good too, but I think just as good as Christian Haynes. Haynes could be just as good as them. And Jackson Powers Johnson is that way at center. So, yeah, you draft a center in the first round. Maybe people say you don't do that. Whatever. This guy's worth taking, and he's strong enough to play at guard. So, yeah, you go ahead and grab Jackson Powers Johnson if you can. And Nate Wiggins, my issue with him has always been his weight. I think he was like 174 at the combine. And then like a week, 10 days later at his pro day, he weighed 180, like 100, almost 184, 182. So he showed he can put on weight really quick. And Wiggins is 6'2", so he's got the frame that he could get up to 190. Wiggins' speed in the 40, and people talk about Xavier Worthy with that 4.22 or whatever he ran. Wiggins ran a 4.28. So Wiggins ran a sub 4.3. And he's 6'2". I don't like that he fluctuates from 170 to 190 pounds. I don't like that. But if he could run a 4.3 at 190 pounds, when you watch the film, he's such a good cornerback. Nate Wiggins is worth a first-round pick for sure. I just don't think the Saints will be interested in him because he's kind of light. But, you got Kool-Aid McKinstry, and you've got Terry and Arnold, and they're both 180-something. So Nate Wiggins is there, and I would consider McKinstry or Wiggins at that point if I was picking a cornerback. And rounding out my top 32, Darius Robinson. I love his size. That's why I would pick him above Latu with his health concerns. Or the Alabama, Dallas Turner guy, Turner dropped into coverage quite a bit. I just wish I had more assurances that he would be a great linebacker, because if I knew that Dallas Turner could play linebacker every down, if I had assurances of that, then he would be on this top 32. You don't put a lot of linebackers in your top, 10, 15. They have to be exceptional players. And let's see if Dallas Turner is exceptional enough to prove me wrong. All right, thanks for watching, guys. That is my top 32. That's the only list I'm going to give you. I kind of went through it for the last 2 days and settled on this kind of presentation. And the interesting part is the offensive lineman, because that's where we believe the Saints are going to go in the first round. So that's the way I got it. I got you top 8 who you should take no matter what. And then after that, you've got a handful of players who can turn out to be better than these offensive linemen. But I think when it's all said and done, the offensive linemen are the way to go. Hi, Bellamy. Oh, my baby. You're so handsome. My bellboy had to come and see me. I love all my babies. Excuse me. So, subscribe to Rosenfield 10. And I'll talk to you later. Who dat? That's Bellamy. That's who that is.